It was 1973, outside a small hotel in Memphis. Elvis Presley had just stepped to his car when a young man in uniform called his name. The king froze, turned, and the moment that followed would stop traffic and bring strangers to tears. If you believe music and kindness can change someone's life in a single moment, stay with me, because what happened next between Elvis and this young soldier is a story you'll never forget. The brakes let out a long, tired hiss as the Greyhound bus eased to a stop on Union Avenue. The door folded open with a metallic groan, letting the thick Memphis heat rush in. Boots hit the pavement first. Army boots, scuffed and dulled from months of sand and stone. The young man stepped down, a duffel slung over one shoulder. His uniform was still dusted with the tan of far-off deserts. The air felt different here, dense, heavy, and scented, with barbecue smoke drifting from a block away. Somewhere, a blues guitar licked softly from a shop radio. Cars rolled past with lazy summer impatience. He stopped for a moment on the sidewalk, scanning the street like he was measuring weather. It was real. The storefronts hadn't changed. The paint was still chipped on the corner diner. But the war had carved something into his eyes. A quiet weight. A voice cut through the air. "Jimmy, that you?" A neighbor waved from across the street. He managed a half smile, lifting his free hand. "Hey, Mr. Collins." He had imagined this walk home 1,000 times overseas, but it felt smaller now, quieter. Inside his breast pocket he carried a folded photograph himself at 19, grinning in front of Graceland's gates, holding a cardboard sign that read, "I'll meet the king one day." His buddies had laughed back then. "Sure you will, Jimmy," they'd said, "when pigs fly." Now he was 23, carrying sandstorms in his memory and the sound of helicopter blades in his ears. Meeting Elvis Presley wasn't even on the list anymore. He started to ward home, the bus exhaust fading behind him when he heard it. A ripple of noise, not far off, a woman's voice shouting, laughter and music. Jimmy slowed. The sounds came from the direction of the Peabody Hotel, just 2 blocks away. A deeper hum joined it, the crowd's murmur. Then he saw the flicker of blue lights reflecting off windows. Police motorcycles angled at the curb. A knot of people pressed together at the hotel entrance. Someone in the group shouted, "It's him," and the tone was electric. Jimmy stepped closer, weaving between parked cars. That's when he caught it, a low, unmistakable drawl drifting through the summer air. He froze. He'd heard that voice on vinyl records spun in his parents' living room, in mess hall radios thousands of miles away. A kid nearby tugged his mother's hand and whispered, "Mama, that's Elvis." Jimmy's pulse quickened. His boots felt heavier. Was it really him? Right here. Another cheer went up from the crowd. Camera flashes popped against chrome bumpers. He adjusted his duffel strap, his palms starting to sweat. Somehow, in a city of hundreds of thousands, he was standing just steps away from the one man he'd once dreamed of meeting. And before the minute was over, he'd be even closer. He moved toward the noise. His hands started to shake. The noise grew louder with each step. Jimmy could make out the shuffle of feet, the crackle of radios, and the metallic snap of cameras winding film. The Peabody's entrance was a knot of people. Women in sundresses leaned over the rope line, clutching autograph books. Men in short sleeve shirts craned their necks, squinting past the crowd. Jimmy edged closer, catching glimpses between shoulders. First, the flash of a police badge, then a bodyguard's jacket sleeve, and then there it was. The black hair, perfectly slicked, the high white collar of a suit catching the sunlight like polished bone. Elvis Presley. He was taller than Jimmy. Expected, broader through the chest. His steps were deliberate, slow enough for the crowd to drink him in, but purposeful, like a man moving toward the next stage in his day. Beside him, the long black hood of a Cadillac waited, door open. Jimmy stopped cold, his heel catching on the curb. For a moment, it was like seeing a ghost from his own youth. He was back in that photo at 19, standing outside Graceland's gates, telling his friends he'd meet the king. The air around him felt charged. Camera flashes strobed off the Cadillac's chrome, and the crowd's noise fell into a steady chant of Elvis. Elvis. Jimmy tried to think of what he'd say, but his mind was blank. Then a hand on his arm. A Memphis police officer, sunglasses perched low, leaned in and spoke over the crowd. "Come on, son. Let's get you closer." Jimmy blinked. "What?" "You heard me. This way." The officer's grip was firm but not unfriendly, guiding him toward the front. Jimmy's boots dragged a little, his heartbeat thudding in his ears. They cleared the first row of fans, the rope line sagging slightly. Jimmy's eyes locked on Elvis, just a few steps away now. Then, from somewhere behind him, a woman's voice rang out, high and clear. "Elvis, this boy just came back from the war." Everything froze. Elvis paused mid-step. His head turned slightly, eyes narrowing against the glare as he looked toward the voice. Jimmy felt every camera lens shift toward him. The Cadillac driver glanced at Elvis, waiting. The officer's hand stayed on Jimmy's shoulder. Elvis squinted, studying the young man in uniform. The noise dropped to a low murmur, like the hush before a prayer. Even the cameras seemed to click slower. Someone whispered, "He's looking right at him." Elvis took one step forward, then another. Jimmy's mouth went dry. His pulse pounded in his neck. The king's gaze didn't waver, and for a second it felt like there was no one else on the sidewalk. He was coming straight for him. Elvis starts, walking directly toward Jimmy. The crowd parting as if they already knew something extraordinary was about to happen. The space between them closed fast. Jimmy could hear his own breathing over the crowd. The sun caught the edge of Elvis's sunglasses as he stopped just a foot away. Without hesitation, Elvis reached out. The handshake was firm, warm, the kind that made you feel seen. "Welcome home, son," he said, voice low but carrying enough for the front rows to hear. Jimmy tried to answer, but his throat locked. The only sound he managed was a quiet, "Thank you, sir." Elvis didn't let go. His other hand came up, resting on Jimmy's shoulder. The grip was steady, almost grounding. From the street, passing cars slowed. Drivers craned their necks. One leaned out the window of a pickup and muttered, "That's Elvis, man." A street saxophonist across the corner stopped mid-note horn hanging loosely at his side. Even the hotel bellhop paused in mid-step, holding the door open for no one. In particular, Jimmy could feel the weight of every set of eyes on them. Elvis's head tilted slightly, his voice dropping so only Jimmy could hear. "Where'd they have you?" Jimmy swallowed. "Vietnam." Elvis gave a slow nod, his expression tightening for just a beat. "Long way from home." They stood like that, hands still clasped, for what felt like a minute. Cameras clicked in rhythm. A woman near the front dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Some witnesses later swore they saw Elvis glance back at the waiting Cadillac, then turn his body more toward Jimmy. As if making it clear he wasn't in a rush, Jimmy shifted his duffel strap, the weight suddenly lighter. A voice in the crowd shouted, "Give him something, Elvis." Another added, "Sing for him." Elvis chuckled softly, still holding eye contact with Jimmy. "You like music?" Jimmy gave a half smile. "Always have." Elvis looked out toward the crowd, his voice rising now, smooth and commanding. "I think this young man deserves something special." The reaction was instant. Cheers, applause, a ripple of excitement swept through the onlookers. Jimmy felt heat rising in his face. He had no idea what Elvis meant, but the energy around them had shifted, the quiet reverence turning into a kind of charged anticipation. From the corner of his eye, Jimmy saw one of Elvis's bodyguards turn toward the Cadillac trunk. Elvis finally released Jimmy's hand, but not the connection. His palm tapped Jimmy's arm. A silent stay right here. A breeze stirred the heavy summer air, carrying the smell of street hot dogs and the faint tang of gasoline from an idling car. Behind them, a motorcycle engine revved twice and then cut off, leaving the space strangely silent except for the shuffling of feet. Elvis took a step back, looking him over once more, almost like he was deciding on the next move. The crowd leaned in. Then Elvis smiled, that familiar, slightly crooked smile people had seen 1,000 times on TV. But here it was, inches away, and aimed directly at Jimmy. He turned to the crowd and repeated, louder this time, "I think this young man deserves something special." And with that, Elvis made a small hand gesture toward his bodyguard. The bodyguard popped the Cadillac's trunk. The lid lifted with a slow metallic groan. Inside, among neatly packed cases, was an acoustic guitar in a worn brown hard dash shell. Elvis reached for it himself. No stage, no mic. Just him and 6 strings under the Memphis sun. He stepped back toward Jimmy, slipping the strap over his shoulder. A couple of loose notes rang out as his fingers tested the tuning. Even without amplification, the sound cut clean through the crowd noise. Then came the first steady strum, warm, familiar, instantly recognizable to anyone who'd grown up with a radio in the 60s. Jimmy knew the song before Elvis even sang the first word. He'd heard it in mess halls, sometimes on static-filled armed forces radio broadcasts, the kind that made you close your eyes and picture home. Elvis's voice rolled out, deep and unhurried, floating over the street. Conversations faded. The crowd's restless shuffle went still. Even a taxi driver waiting at the light tilted his head toward the sound. People began gathering from farther down the block, drawn by the unmistakable tone. A few hotel guests leaned over the balcony railings. Craning for a better view, Jimmy stood frozen, duffel still slung over his shoulder, hands trembling. He wasn't sure if it was from nerves, heat, or the way the music seemed to strip the noise from his mind. Halfway through the verse, Elvis glanced at him. Then he stepped closer. "Sing with me," he said, just loud enough for Jimmy to hear. Jimmy's eyes widened. He shook his head. "I can't." "Yes, you can," Elvis replied, still playing, lowering his own voice so Jimmy's could fill the space. For a moment, Jimmy hesitated, then a quiet line slipped out of him, rough, unpolished, but carried by something real. The crowd swayed. Some joined in softly, a single humming harmony that seemed to hold the moment together. It wasn't a performance now. It was a shared breath. By the last verse, Jimmy's voice was stronger. Elvis smiled at him once, almost like a silent approval, and the two finished the song together. The final chord lingered in the air, For a beat, no one moved. Then came the applause, loud, layered, rolling in from every side of the street. Jimmy let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. His hands dropped to his sides, fingers still buzzing from adrenaline. As the crowd's cheers softened, Elvis stepped closer again. His hand came up briefly to Jimmy's shoulder. Then, with no words, he slipped something into Jimmy's palm. Quick, like passing a note in school. Jimmy looked down, his fingers curled instinctively around it, hiding it from the view of the cameras. Elvis gave one last nod, then glanced toward the Cadillac. Whatever Elvis had just given him, Jimmy could feel it was more than just a souvenir. Jimmy slowly uncurled his fingers. In his palm lay a silk scarf, deep blue, edged with tiny white stars. It was damp with the heat of the afternoon, and from being around Elvis's own neck just minutes earlier. For luck, Elvis said quietly, his voice low enough that only Jimmy could hear. Jimmy stared at it, searching for words. None came. The weight of it was small, but it felt like holding a piece of the moment itself. From the crowd, someone shouted, "Speech." A ripple of laughter followed, but Jimmy's throat was tight. He managed, finally, "This is the first time in months I've felt at home." The cheer that went up wasn't wild, it was warm. A few people clapped slowly, others just nodded, as if they understood exactly what he meant. Elvis smiled faintly and clapped Jimmy on the back. "Come on," he said, guiding him toward the curb. The Cadillac door swung open, chrome flashing in the sun, but Elvis didn't get in. Instead, he turned to his driver. "Give us a minute." The driver stepped back, closing the door softly. Jimmy and Elvis stood a little apart from the crowd now, voices dropping beneath the hum of traffic. Witnesses couldn't catch every word, but they saw the way Elvis's expression shifted, sometimes serious, sometimes breaking into that half-dash smile. One phrase carried far enough to be heard. "You've got a seat at Graceland any time, Jimmy." Swallowed hard, unsure if he was meant to answer or just take it in. They shook hands again, slower this time. Elvis's grip lingered before he finally stepped back toward the Cadillac. As he slid into the back seat, Elvis gave a small wave, not to the crowd, but directly to Jimmy. The engine rumbled to life, and the car eased away, swallowed by the late afternoon traffic. Jimmy stood there, scarf still clutched in his hand, the crowd's chatter starting to fade into the usual city noise. He didn't know that the day wasn't over, not really, because exactly 7 days later, as the morning sun broke over the rooftops, a delivery truck would pull up in front of his house. The driver would step out with a small, neatly wrapped package, addressed in bold handwriting, and when Jimmy opened it, he'd realize Elvis's words on that sidewalk had been more than just kindness in the moment. A week later, the package arrived and the handwriting on the label nearly made him drop it. The package was small, no bigger than a shoebox, wrapped in plain brown paper. Jimmy turned it over in his hands. The return address stopped him cold. Graceland. His heart kicked in his chest. He carried it to the kitchen table, fingers fumbling at the twine. The knot slipped loose, the paper tearing away in 2 quick rips. Inside was a box, lined with crisp tissue paper. On top lay a single envelope, cream-colored, with his name written in bold, confident handwriting. He slid a finger under the flap. Inside, on Graceland stationery, was a short note. "You'll always have a seat in the front row." Jimmy stared at it for a long moment, almost afraid to blink. Beneath the letter were 2 glossy concert tickets, front row, upcoming show, and a small leather guitar pick case. The case was worn, the leather soft from use. Inside was a single pearl-white pick, embossed with Elvis's signature. Jimmy sat back in his chair, the morning light catching on the edge of the ticket stubs. His mother stepped into the room, still in her robe, coffee cup in hand. "What's that?" she asked. He handed her the letter. She read it slowly, then pressed it to her chest. Her eyes shimmered. Jimmy was all she could say. By noon, neighbors had heard. People stopped by to see the scarf, the tickets, the pick. The story spread faster than he could tell it. Some came just to shake his hand, as if a little of the magic might pass to them. Others just wanted to hear him tell it, how the king of rock and roll had stopped in the middle of a Memphis sidewalk, and for a few minutes made the world feel smaller and kinder. Years later, the scarf would be framed behind glass in Jimmy's living room. The pick would stay in its leather case, kept in the top drawer of his desk, and the letter that stayed in the same envelope. Edges softened from being read so many times. When people asked why he kept them so carefully, Jimmy always said the same thing. "It's not about meeting Elvis. It's about the day I learned kindness can cut through noise, pain, and fame." That day, Elvis didn't sing for the crowd. He sang for me. Sometimes the smallest gestures leave the deepest marks, and they live on far longer than the moment itself. If this moved you, share it with someone who believes kindness can stop a city in its tracks. And tell me in the comments, what's the most unforgettable welcome home you've ever witnessed? If this moved you, share it with someone who believes kindness can stop a city in its tracks. What's the most unforgettable welcome home you've ever witnessed?